Make This Make Sense brings together three professors and dynamic guests to unpack
the systems, trends, and social dynamics everyone is confused about,
with the women who actually understand them. With your hosts,
entrepreneurship professor Dr. Colleen Robb,
entrepreneurship instructor Annie Stout,
and blockchain instructor Kelly Werder.
Rachel Robbins is an instructional coach in St. George, Utah. She facilitates teacher growth and development by providing coaching services. She also teaches concurrent enrollment English at Utah Tech University. She's launched the Utah CTE Teaching as a Profession, and additionally, she is a facilitator for the WCSD Teacher Leader Endorsement for Instructional Design and Assessment courses.
And we're back. Episode 5 already.
Annie.
Isn't this exciting?
Annie,
yes.
Did you change your chair?
I did, based on a strong recommendation for a concern about my free time.
No, Kelly and I loved your gamer chair.
I was calling it the Captain Kirk chair, but it's fine.
Well, maybe it'll come back.
You have to bring it back.
Okay. It should make a comeback. I'm really excited.
I'm not going to tell you when.
Just surprise us. Surprise us. I'm excited for our next guest. Tell us a little bit, Annie, who we got coming. Yeah. Rachel's coming up.
She's an instructional coach out of Utah, and I found her through an article that she published in NEA, and she's talking about cell phones in the classroom. She also talks about teacher burnout. So I think
we know a little bit about that.
I don't know anything about that. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
I don't know.
Well, let's bring her up and get rolling. Welcome, Rachel Robbins, to Make This Make Sense. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks so much. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us today.
Happy to be here.
Great. Can you just, in Make This Make Sense, we kind of want to know what an instructional coach does and what are things that you found across, over your time in education that have changed in instructional coaching, and just speak to that a little bit, if you would.
Great. Instructional coaching is the best gig. I work at Crimson Cliffs High School in southern Utah. So not the beautiful snowy mountains of Utah, but the desert. We're a couple hours outside of Vegas. So I have like 105-degree weather over here.
Oh, wow.
But it's a dry heat. So it's not.
Yeah, I keep hearing that. It's still a heat.
Instructional coaching, though, I work with new teachers and help them learn teaching strategies and perfect their practice. I also work with veteran teachers and take them through coaching cycles. Our district follows the teachings of Jim Knight. So we focus on the impact cycle. And I'm also kind of the emotional support animal in my school too. Mm-hmm. And people come to me with different concerns and problems. And I think of myself as an advocate for teachers. And it's really joyful work. I love to see teachers grow. My school is unique. We have a faculty of about 50. I would say that 2/3 of our teachers are under the age of 40 and in their first 8 years or so of teaching. So we have a young faculty, but they're really eager to learn and try new things, which is great. As far as changes in education, I just finished up year 14. And I think education has changed drastically. I feel like the kids I taught my first year are very different than the kids I teach now. I think we've all seen drops in attention span. This is probably nationwide, but a little bit less grit and resilience. We have a generation that's used to having screens and having things instantly. And so that work and effort is definitely a little bit different. And so as a result, we do have tried and true strategies that still work no matter what. Like turn and talk to a partner seems to be good wherever. But teachers, I think, are having to hustle harder to get the attention of students and engagement. And we need to shift how we teach a little bit as far as maybe giving them information in smaller increments and making it really relevant to the real world, and just switching up our practice a little bit as the generation that we have now is different.
Great. Thank you so much.
Do you think that is more and I realize this is more anecdotal and your just personal opinion. Do you think it's more from what happened with COVID? Do you think it's more social media? Do you think it's more AI? Because I feel like those three factors have really impacted how students learn. And I wasn't sure if you had a feeling on like which of those three are really impacting the students.
Oh, 100%. I think COVID definitely made a difference. And it was different across the nation because in Southern Utah, we only had a quarter without school, even though we're still seeing the ramifications. So in other parts of the country, they had longer spans without school, and that made a big difference. And I think coupled with the screen time was like the perfect storm. And now we have AI added to the mix, and that's even added more complexity. I would say overarching screen time's the biggest problem, and COVID just gave kids an opportunity to be more dependent on screens, and I feel like it's kind of snowballed to where we are now.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And we've seen this at the college level as well.
Yeah.
Like I had one semester where I was like, okay, what is going on? Like they couldn't keep their attention for anything. And it was the students who had graduated in 2020 who were now towards the end of their, it was like 2024. So you could see it, you could just feel it. It was palpable in the room where their attentions were, it was very difficult. So I think that between all these factors, yeah, it's really hard. So it's not just we're seeing it at the college level as well. For
Yeah,
sure.
it's frustrating, and I think it leads to teacher burnout too, because they're having to work harder, they're having to hustle more. And I think some teachers perceive teaching now as more performative because they feel they need to engage students. That becomes exhausting.
Yeah, so it's almost like teachers have become entertainers.
Yeah, which is
Right.
what we signed up to do. I mean, I know teaching's a little bit of that,
Right.
but
It's always been a little bit of that. Yeah.
But now it's
because the beauty of teaching is that rich interaction with students, engaging in the learning process, which to me is so invigorating and fulfilling. But when teachers feel like they're competing against screens, against cell phones, against AI, and they have to hustle more and be more entertaining, that's kind of a losing game. We can't fight that. Which is why technology bans, especially cell phone bans in the classroom, I think are going to be really great.
I'm doing a little bit of that. I do that for sorry about that. I've tested this this method out where the first 30 minutes they don't have any technology. And Colleen actually came into my class and witnessed that. And then we use AI, and then we talk about what was the difference in terms of their approach. And it kind of goes quickly. 30 minutes at first I thought was such a long time to ask them to do that, right? And then they started to embrace it. Are you seeing that?
Yes. In Utah in 2025, we had State Bill 178 that passed, and that said no cell phones during instructional time. And then we're coming up on our next school year, and State Bill 69 passed, and that's no cell phones in schools, period, which will be interesting. But I do feel I teach concurrent enrollment English when I'm not doing instructional coaching. And it is interesting to me that the kids, I saw a lot of favorable responses, and I saw as I go classroom to classroom, not only my own students, but other students in the building, huge rates of engagement without the cell phones, because when we remove it, it's no longer an issue, and kids started to really enjoy teaching and not teaching, but enjoy being educated again. So I would agree that K through 12, especially high school, we're seeing that as well. And in my district, as far as, and statewide as well, elementary schools and middle schools had no phones at all starting last year. And the feedback I have from teachers has been overwhelmingly positive. That because we're removing that, because we're teaching, I know you're teaching young adults and adults, we're teaching adolescents, they don't have the executive function skills to regulate, to choose to put it away. Most kids just don't have that right now, especially in a world where it's always at their fingertips. So it's been fun to see the excitement around education again, because it's like their brains are freed up and we can engage them. So I would definitely see it's positive and the kids are feeling it too.
Was there
Have-
pushback to the bill? And where was the pushback coming from, if there
It was
was?
interesting. Definitely some pushback. We always have a small group of parents that push back because they want access to their kids 24/7, especially in the higher demographic. I'm at a higher demographic school right now. Those are the parents we're seeing the biggest pushback from. The article that I published in the Salt Lake Tribune that Annie saw, NEA kind of featured that article, and that's what Annie saw, and that's how we initially met. But I did a survey in September of 2025, and 2/3 of students surveyed, and it was students across my district from the age of 12 to 18. 2/3 of the students were pushing back against the bill because, and they had some reasons that I can go through here in a minute. But that was interesting to me. Teachers, 100%, no pushback from teachers, except the one outlier who was probably a sports coach. Who's like,
It's always one.
to have phones.
You need to check on scores and things. He probably, he's checking on his
Yes.
FanDuel or yeah.
Yeah, that's actually Kelly.
But teachers were in support. Most parents were. Like I said, we do have that population, kind of the helicopter lawnmower parents. And then initially, 2/3 of students were not thrilled with it. I'm going to do the survey again, but I would say by the time January rolled around, I heard very few complaints from students. In our high school, they could still have phones during passing time and lunch. So they weren't without them. I'm excited to see what it'll be like next year because it is bell to bell. But the legislature did embed a little caveat that high schools might have more autonomy. And I really hope that our district stays strong and takes a hard line. Something, just a side note, and Annie, I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but towards the end of the year, we had a bomb threat at our school. It was one of those crazy ones that was fake and it came from a number that couldn't be traced. But they evacuated our school and it was towards the end of the school day. So we didn't know what was happening. So most of us instructed students, leave everything. We're just leaving the building. And because it was a bomb threat, they had to do due diligence and have canines come in and make sure the school was safe. And so kids weren't able to take their phones home. A lot of kids left their car keys, but everybody got home. And our principal sent an email that night that said, hey, I'm going to come to the school at 6:30 in the morning if any students need their phones. And we had 0 kids show up to get their phones early. And most kids were like, I didn't have it for an afternoon, but life went on. And so I thought that was an interesting, maybe the realization striking them that if you're without your phone, life goes on and you're okay. And so I thought that was interesting that as much as they love their phones, they had the opportunity to come earlier and nobody did. So kind of interesting. So I think the data I found in September is going to be different than what compared to what I find this fall.
Really
So
interesting.
you're planning on launching that in September?
Yeah, I'm really curious because I felt like I got a good baseline. I'm curious to see what it looks like when I do it again in a year, where they've had a school year with phone restrictions and to see how they feel now. So 2/3 of students surveyed, and I had a few hundred, had issues with the cell phone ban. And I'm curious to see if it's changed. And some of those issues I feel like we need to proactively resolve because there's definitely some misunderstanding and students don't always understand what we're really doing and why.
What are some of the arguments from students' perspective for keeping their phones? Like, what are some of the most popular arguments that you heard on, no, I need to have my phone in the classroom? I mean, I know from my perspective, a lot of the times they're like, well, what if something happens, with my parents or my siblings? I need to be, available. That's one of the more popular ones that I hear. But did you hear, kind of overwhelming responses on why they wanted to keep their phones?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So the number one reason was emergencies. And unfortunately, we're living in a horrific time where there's school shootings and there's violence in schools. And a lot of kids were concerned, if something happens, I need my phone to contact my parents. 100% understandable. the students don't realize, like in our school district, they have a button they push that is connected directly to emergency services. And we are minutes away from a fire department where I am. And so, and students don't know that there's also a system in our LMS, which is Power School, that would immediately notify parents if anything happened. And so that was number one. Number two was anxiety. Like I felt anxious without my phone. And I feel like those self-regulation skills are something that we can teach because that's just a good life skill. I wrote these down because there was one that I thought was pretty funny. Oh, we had a lot of students. This one surprised me. I didn't see this one coming. They said, I need to know how to use my cell phone or not use my cell phone while I'm in school so that I can be prepared for the job field, like the real world. So kind of, they didn't use the word regulation, but they were saying, teach me regulation here so I can handle it when I am 18 and I'm in the workforce. And then the other reason, which was really just a few snarky kids, was that teachers need to be more interesting. And if they were more interesting, I would put my phone away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's funny.
Those kids, you can't win them over.
Right.
I feel like what we haven't done is communicate the research, the brain science behind why screens are detrimental to students, especially cell phones and social media. There's a wealth of research now. A lot of it comes from Jonathan Haidt and the Anxious Generation. And there's also a great website called Phone Free Schools. I'll include all this in show notes.
Thank you.
I feel like we don't talk to students. We say, put your phones away. You have short attention spans. You can't control yourself. We don't tell them the brain science, that it's actually created different neural pathways in your brain. And we need to say, we realize this is difficult to control, but you can control it and form new neurological pathways, and you will be a happier person, because we know the rates of excessive screen use, huge difference in anxiety and depression. And in the world today, most kids do struggle with that on some degree. And so I feel like we need to communicate and help them. We need to teach them regulation. And even, I know because of the administration we have right now, they're moving away from social and emotional learning. But I feel like that still has a really relevant place in the classroom, because we need to teach our kids how to focus, how to center, how to ground themselves so that they can get the most out of education that they can. So I feel like there's a lot we could do to help students understand the why behind the policies.
It seems like maybe we're underestimating their ability to understand the why too. And maybe that's part of the, lack of explaining it, is because, they don't need to know. They just need to put it away.
Yes.
And it probably would help a lot, especially the older kids. I mean, even middle school. I think there's a lot of, they can understand this, and because they're feeling it. So they can recognize that the truth in the research because they're feeling it themselves. So it makes a lot of sense to go over that so that it's not just coming from nowhere. This isn't like, we're not just saying it because I told, because I said so. There's some really valid research that backs up the because I said so.
Yeah, and to make it like digestible, we don't need to throw the Anxious Generation book at it.
Right.
By the way, there's a graphic novel of the Anxious Generation, which is pretty.
Oh, is there?
So for K through 12, it's more understandable.
That's
but
cool.
a really good resource to share with all of you. So the Policymakers is a nonprofit in the state of Utah, and their mission is to implement legislation that affects women and children. So they've taken the cell phone bills that have passed in the state, and they've created resources. So they have a one-pager that is really cool, and it just summarizes, like, here's the detrimental effects of cell phones. And it's really easy to understand, and it's something I'm actually going to give to my students and say, here's the why in a nutshell. Now, what questions do you have? And kind of get their curiosity going. But they've also compiled a handbook that's much larger that gives like step-by-step implementation ideas from best practices across the state. And I've done some work with them, and they're so happy to get the word out to everyone in the country. So I will share all of that too, so that it can be shared with your listeners. So there,
Great.
I know there's movements out there, and I'm sure most states have similar nonprofits that are doing similar work. But there is a movement, I think, by educators to help kids understand. And I think that is now coming out to the forefront, and it's accessible data. And I'll be happy to share that with your listeners. So I
Amazing.
think some really good things are going to come down the wire because of this.
Amazing.
I'm curious, and this is more of a question because I do research in gender research, and there's research that says that the male prefrontal cortex develops later than females, right? Like typically a female, 23 roughly, right?
Yes.
And then males can even be, research has shown, like in their mid 30s is when
Well, that
it
explains so much.
Finally,
I've always thought it was 25, but now you just blew my mind with that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
thank you, Colleen.
Yes. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have gotten married so early. But anyway, have you seen any gender differences at the K through 12 level? Like have you noticed any differences at that level that have been noticeable or worth mentioning from your perspective?
Yes, and I love the statistics on that. I find that's I've seen that to be true in my life too. I would say girls are more using social media more often, which is not a surprise. And so when you see girls on their phones during class, and I'm especially referring to prior years before there was any restriction, because I'm in classrooms all the time and I'm constantly seeing kids on social media. Girls are kids on computers and phones. Social media is a problem for girls. Boys, I see a lot gaming, and I think I told Annie this story. I was in a science classroom of a young teacher who was pretty introverted and quiet, and she was uncomfortable telling kids to put phones away. And I was behind a student. She was teaching, doing direct instruction for science, and he was shopping for tires. And I bent down and said, "Hey, what are you learning today?" And he just glared at me. So I would say there's gender differences in what they're looking at.
Interesting.
And my experience anecdotally would be that the girls were more understanding and I got less pushback. And this, I think, mirrors even though I didn't ask gender on survey results. Initially, I could see their emails though, so I could usually tell who the student was. I would say boys were giving more pushback. Girls were more apt to understand. And it was the boys that were like doing the snarky comments like teachers need to entertain us more. And I think that might speak to the where my female students might be a little bit quicker to be like, okay, I see where you're coming from. And the boys pushing back a little bit more. So I think it's really interesting to add the gender component though, to see how they react and how they perceive the self.
Yeah, because maybe the messaging is different, right? For boys versus girls in that environment.
And maybe
because
go
go ahead,
ahead.
sorry.
Oh,
No.
I was thinking maybe the female students are more apt to understand if we're talking about connection, and the boys maybe don't understand that quite as much. Just because girls, my observations are that especially teenage girls really appreciate connection, and when they use social media, it's largely for connection. When boys do gaming, sometimes they do connect with gaming, but it's also, I think, more isolated. Where I'm just playing a game, I'm doing my own thing, and girls are more open to that connection. And so I do think the messaging that's actually such a great idea, Colleen, is that I think when we do communicate with students, we need to keep gender differences in mind and be aware that the messaging that we're selling it in a way that everyone can understand.
Yeah. And it also, when you mention gaming, I think gaming on phones tends to be isolated. Gaming on, larger screens
Yes.
and things like that with their headsets, and then they usually are, they often are talking to friends or people they've met. But I think, if it's just a phone, it's usually solo. So that makes a lot of sense.
And I'm thinking about even in my own practice, when I say, okay, everybody put your technology away for 30 minutes, maybe I need to approach that in a different way in terms of communicating with my audience and thinking about what that looks like instead of that blanket statement. I think that will be really helpful to inform my practice going forward.
Yeah, because the other research shows that females in particular, experience almost like imposter syndrome or, a feeling of like negative self-worth because everybody's posting all of these beautiful pictures of themselves and their life is perfect. And there's this comparison, and you just start to see this like negative self-esteem. And this is completely anecdotal, but it seems like boys, which would be more competitive, is more like an escape from reality, whereas females are more like, I'm not measuring up to reality.
Mm.
And it seems like there's that different experience that's happening.
Yes. Yeah, well said. I would completely agree.
That's so
Well,
fascinating. That's Go ahead.
well, no, I was going to say we should move on to
Yeah.
teacher burnout, because
Mhm.
that's something I think is really important to discuss, because these are all factors that are honestly making our job harder and harder. And
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound grim, but I'm not seeing a way out at the moment. And I'm wondering if you have tools and strategies and tactics, techniques that you could share with our audience. It's particularly those of us that are educators. Like, is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, I want to believe that there is, but it's so hard right now. So when I was made instructional coach 4 years ago, surveyed my teachers to see what they needed. And the number one need was burnout, that a lot of teachers were ready to quit. And I know that the statistics are pretty high, that a lot of teachers leave within their first 5 years. And so I kind of spent that whole summer just reading and researching and seeing what I could find. And I found a lot. But the best thing I found was from a former teacher who created a program called the Teacher Cohort. And I will share that in the show notes as well. And she formulated a handbook that walked teachers through wellness skills. And so we call it the whole teacher cohort, and it's a voluntary group teachers can be in. We meet every 3 to 4 weeks during lunch, and we work on developing these skills. And so I feel like preventing teacher burnout is one of my passions because I see the struggle. I've sat with teachers sobbing because it's so defeating because we love what we do. We love kids. We love learning. We love educating, and we have all these factors pushing in on us. And so a few skills that we worked really hard to develop in my school to just kind of find peace is, and I need to backtrack a little bit. The philosophy is we have to be in a good place and be whole in order to educate our students. And as adults, everybody has hardships. Everyone's going through something. Everyone has family challenges, so whether it's health challenges. We've got a lot of teachers like going through divorces, teacher who had a miscarriage, like some really, really difficult things. And it's learning how do you deal with that and still show up for your students. And so we worked on developing a lot of specific skills. The first one is like setting boundaries and helping teachers see that when you're here, you're teaching, you're working. When you go home, you get to be with your friends and family. And you don't need to be checking your email at 10 o'clock at night. Because of our demographic, we do have some parents that are a little bit more aggressive. And I had a teacher that checked their email at night. They had a horrible email from a parent that was really mean, and they couldn't sleep. And then they show up the next day and they're just wasted. So boundary setting is something that we work on. We work on things that might seem silly, like breathing, taking a breath, centering before kids walk in. We've talked about the power of just like being hydrated and eating healthy. And so we address this whole spectrum of skill development to help teachers. And it's made a difference. Initially, we had a very high turnover rate for our school. And it's a lovely school. It was the newest one in the district. The kids are high achievers. They're polite. They're wonderful. Some of the parents are nuts. Most of the parents are fine. like a revolving door. Teachers just and it's been really amazing to see how things have changed and that we have a much higher retention rate of teachers. And instead of 10 new teachers this next year, I have 2.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's
Wow.
great.
And I
So
think
whatever you're doing is definitely working. That's great.
I hope so. But I think a lot of it is just helping teachers be very, very intentional in preserving their peace. And then
Mhm.
our district has adopted a similar program. So they have monthly challenges that are wellness based.
Mm,
Our district has provided, because our district had a higher turnover as well. District now has 15 free therapy sessions through Tava Health.
great.
Um, that's been really cool. And so just letting teachers know that if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling depressed and overwhelmed, like let's get you some help. You don't need to do this in isolation. Acknowledging that teaching's really, really hard gig.
Right.
And we're not all living the 1980s inspirational teacher movie life. Like we're just
Mr. Holland's Opus.
right.
Best.
I wanna be
Teachers' Minds, I got a whole
I
I
know,
love
but
those
it's
movies.
not that way. And so
Okay.
it's really powerful to have these conversations with teachers. And we talk about managing stress and we talk about developing mindfulness. And it's just been, I think, the most enriching thing I've ever done. And it's helped me as well. But I've seen teachers still showing up with a smile on their face. We're not doing toxic positivity, like we know things are hard, but just letting them know that you don't need to suffer alone. And not to be grim, but you're replaceable. And
Yeah.
life will go on if you don't show up. So take your sick time, use your leave.
Mm.
And I wish we just had PTO in our district, but we have sick leave and we have personal days off. And we had a former HR director that found out teachers were taking mental health days. And I
Mhm.
believe made national news because he pushed back. And we just tell teachers that's nonsense. You have sick leave. You don't have to say why, but
Mhm.
take a day once a month and just take care of yourself.
Yeah.
It's okay. The kids will be okay if you're not there. And what really matters is who you are outside of school.
Mm.
Sadly, we had a teacher in a neighboring school that died of a heart attack the last day of school. Terrible,
Oh,
very loved teacher. And everybody was a little horrified that like the next day his job was posted.
Wow.
And
Oh my gosh.
I know it was awful. But I remind teachers of that, that if something happens, they will find someone else right away. But
yeah.
if you're struggling, you can't be replaced at home. Whether you're a friend, a sibling, a parent, a child, whatever you are, your many roles in life, that's priceless. And that's where your focus needs to be. And it's difficult in teaching because we view it as more of a calling than a job.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
more of an identity rather than
Mhm.
just this is what I do to earn money. And
Mhm.
that's the beauty of teaching is that it is people who want to make a difference, who want to give back, that are service oriented. And you have to balance it with appropriate measures in place so that you will be okay as a teacher.
Yeah.
So I'll share tons of resources. There's so many good books right now about teacher burnout, lots of different ways. I just think teachers need to be really proactive to find a method that works for them and just don't assume you're going to be okay if you don't do anything.
Yeah. For sure.
And I
Amazing.
think, yeah, I think when you're talking about burnout, if every district or higher education institution had some kind of support like this, I wonder how many shifts would be occurring, or I can see where, all of your energy, time, identity is wrapped up in this core mission. And when you fail or you feel like you failed, this perceived failure, it can really like take over your life. At least it has in my case sometimes, where I
Yeah.
just bring it home and I think all the time about how could I have made that better? What could I have done differently? But maybe if I had a group of people to talk to, about this, which I now have, which is great. We've kind of created our own. That's why we created this podcast, I think, in terms of, supporting each other, how different that experience would have been. So I think it's great work that you're providing and creating that other districts could adopt.
Thank you. I really think that we need to create the systems to match the need. I don't think you will find a school in our country where people aren't feeling burned out.
Yeah.
And so I think it needs to be mindfulness of a district about, like, what if they put as much emphasis on teacher wellness as they do test scores? How cool
Yeah.
would that be?
What an idea.
Hey,
Mhm.
test
Mhm.
scores matter, and if our teachers are not okay, we are
Yeah.
not gonna get the good test scores. It
Nope.
doesn't matter. It's got to be the first priority is that
They're
make sure.
directly connected. I mean, if your teachers are completely burned out, how do you think the test scores are going to go up? They're
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
So, yeah, of
And
course.
so again, it goes back to intentionality that we need to have the focus about we need to take care of our people so they can take care of our kids so that we can have this lovely, beautiful experience of educating the next generation. And
Love
so
that.
I really hope it catches fire. I know there's more conversation. I also know there's a huge movement now about, and lots of content, social media about teachers that leave the profession. So
I
it's
know, I've seen some of those. Mhm.
people that leave a high demand religion and
Mhm.
people that leave a high demand career like teaching. And there's all these resources to help people transition out, which is fine if that's what people choose. I don't want to make light of that. But we need to put more effort into retaining our teachers so that they don't feel they have to leave and then it's traumatizing when they leave.
Right.
And we can get around that by providing the right kind of support and systems.
Absolutely. And I mean, the other piece of it before we wrap up is I do think that when teachers leave, I mean, I've had this experience myself. You build this relationship with this wonderful teacher that really cares about their students and experiences burnout, and then they're gone. And they're sometimes a very key parental figure to them.
Yes.
And it's a little bit of abandonment that they experience if the teachers aren't taken care of. And so there's the student impact of that as well that I think makes
Mhm.
this issue even more important.
100%. That's such an important thing to bring up because that is, we don't realize the impact we have. You don't know when you're that one person that's anchoring someone. And you're right, when they're gone. And a lot of schools get to at least see kids for a few years, if not loop with them. And then
Mhm.
what do you do as a kid?
Right.
Right. Right.
Thank you. Thank you so much I've learned so much today. This is really
Yeah. This has been
fascinating.
great. And we're going to put all of these resources in the show notes for anyone who's listening. Annie, you had a really good question here that I just kind of wanted to throw out as
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
final question. Because you mentioned, what do you tell a high schooler who's considering teaching? But here's all these warnings. Like what, how do we, get those next generation of teachers to engage and stay and stick around long enough to become that next generation?
That is a good question. And I love that because the other thing I do is I teach Utah's CTE career pathway teaching as a profession. And I just launched it at my school this last year. So I get to teach high school kids who want to become teachers.
Awesome.
Ah,
It is so fun. It's the best thing I've ever taught.
That's
And
awesome.
so it's concurrent enrollment. So they also get Ed 1010 and Ed
mhm.
2400 Principles of Education. And I had a teacher say to me, "You're teaching that class, who's going to sign up for it?" And I was like, "Oh, burn. I got kids." And I teach a lot of these skills to my students. I mean, with the curriculum, I build in like boundaries. This is why teachers get burned out. Here's what you can do to get around it. And I'm just really positive. So, what would I tell high school kids across the nation? Have faith and make it different. There are things you can do now to be a healthy, focused human, and you will take that into the profession. And you
Awesome.
need to know that you're not responsible for everybody's emotions. You don't have to take care of anybody but yourself. And by taking care of yourself, you'll be able to teach students. And all my kids have a teacher who inspired them. And I tell them that's what you need to anchor into because you will be able to be that for more kids than what you could ever even dream. And so a lot of it is teaching those good skills while they're teenagers in order to take that into the classroom. And that's something that we talk about. And I'm open with them about, hey, teacher burnout's a problem right now. Here's why. Here's what we're trying to do as teachers to be able to work with it. and here's what you could do as high school students as you go into college. So I think a lot of it is just preemptively teaching good coping skills that they can take into the profession, and talking about what's great about what we do and not getting caught up in all the negative. Acknowledging it, but focusing on positive, and that they can make a difference in a small way.
Love that. This has been awesome. It's been such a great chat. Anything else, Annie and Colleen, before we sign off?
No, but I think you are doing an amazing work, and I think you're doing
Absolutely.
systemic work that will really change the trajectory of where we're going. And so I just want to thank you and congratulate you on just your amazing journey and the impact that I'm sure you are making. And hopefully with this podcast and the resources that you're sharing, you can increase the ripples in the pond that you're playing in.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure to see all of you and have this conversation. And just wanted to give a lot of love to all the educators out there. Like, we've got this. There's things we can do. And thanks for including me. This has been great. Appreciate it.
Thanks for saying yes.
Thanks for saying yes. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.